Welcome to Rat Girls Podcast. I'm Abigail Jensen, and we are joined today by Morgan Miller. She's a full-time midwife and also the co-author of the Cycle book. Wait, I have it right here. The Cycle book with Laura Federico, who is a sex therapist. Morgan, welcome to the pod.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. So how did you and Laura get hooked up and decide to write this book about cycles?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is we've been friends for an embarrassingly long time. Actually, we've known each other through eons before being professionals in the world. So, pre becoming a midwife and pre Laura becoming a sex therapist, we were just, gallivanting around in Brooklyn together and living
Love.
our lives and sharing our experiences as one does in their 20s about how complicated it is to be in the world and in our bodies and try and understand them. And, we did eventually develop into professionals with our respective fields, but maintained that friendship, which I highly recommend having a best friend who's a sex therapist. It's really convenient for life. And so over the years,
Free advice. We love.
it's fabulous. So we've worked together side by side and kind of shared and consulted with one another. And as our professional world grew and our relationship in that way, we just kept complaining about this thing that didn't exist and this way that people kept coming into our offices and just feeling like there was this huge gap of what was offered to people.
Yeah. And so then you guys wrote the Cycle book, which is teaching women or people who with a vulva about their cycle and how to track their hormones and get to know their body. And so why is that important? Getting to know our body and knowing our hormones.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, inherently, there's so much about the way that we live in society that teaches us to disengage from ourselves regularly. I mean, even the idea of talking about our bodies and like talking about periods is kind of an ew factor. And it's getting better these days where people are able to talk about menstruation without, hushes around the room. But when we start talking about more than just menstruation and talk about body fluids that are involved in the menstrual cycle, things like cervical fluid, there's still kind of this, aghast response when people are like, oh no, I don't have that. We're not supposed to have that. We're supposed to be fluid, ambiguous beings that change and flow throughout the, days of our lives. But there's a lot of shift that needs to happen around that so that we can understand how to be back in our bodies when so much of, if you were lucky enough to get sex ed in like middle school, it probably just told you at any moment you could get pregnant. So watch out.
Yeah. Get pregnant and die.
Yeah, and like every STI. So everyone was like afraid to sit on a toilet seat forever, Um,
Literally.
but there's so much that we just really miss out on that and understanding how our bodies function and how to exist in them and how we can find comfort in them.
Yeah. And there's so much stuff I love in the book, and I'm so excited to get into it all. But before we get to the main cheese, I just want to compliment you guys on how in depth it is and how it's safe feeling. Like you read it and it's so judgmental free or judgment free, and it's just you talk about so many different topics in a way that's just matter of fact, and I was just very thankful for it.
I love that. I mean, I think that's where Laura and I really love our jobs, our respective jobs as a sex therapist and midwife. There's really no such thing as TMI. It's like nothing's a big deal. So that's the way we live and have conversations, isn't it? It's really nice to normalize that and have it with everyone else.
That's so beautiful. So getting into our main cheese, the cycle, man, oh man, tell me about my cycle. Tell me about tell me about the what are the basics of the cycle, like the phases? Because I feel like even that we don't learn.
Yeah, I think, I mean, sometimes people have like a flashback of that like biology page where there's a graph of the menstrual cycle chart hormones going up and down, and it's just like pure overwhelm. I don't know
Yeah,
how
it's
it's going to
what does
apply to
this
my life.
mean?
Yeah. You don't even really need to know that stuff, but there are some basic phases that are significant hormonal shifts that just happen regularly in menstruating bodies that are so helpful to know because the hormones that are involved in those hormonal shifts actually affect the entirety of your body. So, having some grounding of understanding what some of those are is so helpful. And I think the one that people really know is like menstruation. They know the period, they know when they're bleeding. That's the thing you have to like account for and have products on hand so that you can plan your life. So, most people have some familiarity with that one. And it is important and does tell us a lot. But there's a ton else going on when you're not
Hmm.
bleeding, too. And after that phase, you know, people are really in what we call this first half of the period that we call the follicular phase. That's the part where the body is preparing to release a follicle that releases an egg cell. And that's that act of like ovulation that
That's
happens.
the fun part.
That's that fun, groovy part that happens like mid cycle. And then there's kind of this big chunk of the latter part of the cycle that's the luteal phase, which, you know, if you're on TikTok these days, you hear all about the luteal phase. Everybody's branding. But the
Oh, yeah.
luteal phase is the part post ovulation where your body like kind of fluffs up that like interior part of your uterus and gets it ready to bleed again into the bleeding phase. And that's kind of the gist of what's happening throughout that cycle.
Yeah, and so what do the different phases look like mood-wise, body-wise? Obviously, we see ovulation is like we're out on the streets, we're feral, like we're fun and flirty. But d- w- what does the rest mean for our bodies?
Yeah, it can be different for everyone, but I think that the kind of continuity that we see is that there are these key player hormones that help those shifts happen with throughout your cycle, and those are like the estrogens, progesterone, testosterone's involved in there, and even these. Kind of like a lot of times people associate them with mood hormones, things like serotonin and norepinephrine and like dopamine, the like feel good things. All of those hormone levels fluctuate on a fairly consistent basis each cycle that you have. And so some people, many people actually experience ovulation just like you're saying, where they're like, I'm feeling frisky, I'm feeling good, my energy is on point, I'm like on fire at work, everything is so, so good. But the truth is, for some people, ovulation is like the worst part of their cycle. And that's normal too. It just means that that's how their body responds to those hormones. So it's kind of getting used to whatever your flow is with that. A lot of people, as far as the like more common experiences in that luteal phase, will kind of hunker down and get into a more introspective state where kind of processing information feels better than acting on and creating new things. And so for some people, they identify that as like a restful state and kind of a preparatory state of their cycle. But yeah, it could be different for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. And I love in the book, you guys break like the tracking down into a few different parts. You look at like your your mental cues, your body cues, your cognitive cues, your sexual cues. And it's something I've never thought about before because I'm it's so hard to be in my own body like you were saying. We
Yeah.
disassociate. We try to do things to distract ourselves, and I really love that you break it down into these multiple different cues to pay attention to, and it's not just um because we think, yeah, we're out in the world, we're frisky, but like what does that actually mean our body
Yeah.
feels like at the time? What does that mean my creativity feels like at the
Mhm.
time?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's unfortunately a little bit of this oversimplification and maybe like weird trend branding of hormones these days
When
where
people don't know what a hormone,
yeah,
like I'd be like, please define a hormone for me, TikTok.
yeah. You know, like everyone's like they're whatever they are, those hormones, they're broken. They need fixing, they need hacking, they need like there's something wrong with the
My
hormones. Everybody's
cortisol
yeah,
is through the roof. And you're like, do you
I
know
know.
what cortisol is? It drives me
Right.
nuts.
Right. And it's like when we really break it down and take a step back, hormones are like good guys. They're just hanging out and they're just like little chemical messengers letting your body know what it needs and what's happening. That's it. You know, so I feel like that I really just want to get rid of that like fix your hormone mentality. But it is that like all those chemical messengers that are doing messages around the reproductive cycle, around menstruation and all of those normal flows, they're communicating all of those needs throughout your entire body, which is all interconnected. So yeah, of course that means like your cognition is going to change. Of course that means your muscle function is going to change. How you sleep is going to change. All of it's so connected.
Yeah, and so what's like why do we track? Like what's the important like why do we want to know all this stuff?
Yeah. I mean, it's different for everybody. There's definitely a lot of people that are trying to understand their hormones because they feel like something's wrong. I think that's probably the most common scenario, and probably the reason that all of those TikTok trends are really taking off is because people are desperate for care and help and feel like they can't get answers. So, tracking can be a way to start to understand what's happening in your body and start to kind of learn that language that those hormone communicators are speaking so that you can do something with it and you can use that information to figure out ways to support yourself. So, a lot of people in that instance are looking. Maybe for a diagnosis, or they're maybe looking to understand a recent diagnosis and how that's showing up in their body so that they can figure out if their treatment is working or if they need a different treatment method. That's, I would say, one of the more common reasons. Another one is definitely around fertility when people are
Mhm.
deciding to get pregnant or deciding that they don't want to get pregnant and don't want to be using things like hormonal contraceptives, then they can start to understand what that looks like in their cycle. That one I feel like gets the most attention because it's been going on for a long time. But that's where I feel like if we just talk about fertility, we're missing this huge other scene of what's happening with the cycle when there's so much more going on with it.
Yeah, we're missing like how we take care of ourselves at certain
Exactly.
times.
It's such a disservice to kind of belittle the menstrual cycle to just being reproductive based when it is a full functionality of how our body exists in the world.
Yeah, so I have tracked my cycle for a little bit and because I was tired of every month being like, "Man, I have the same thing happening every month. Like, I wonder why and I wonder why I'm shocked,"
Mhm.
too. And it's been really nice for planning. Like,
Mhm.
I'm actually worse like I feel good during my period. I'm worse
Mhm.
before and I'm worse for like 3 days after. And so
Mhm.
like knowing that about me and knowing I'm just low energy and kind of headachy and all that stuff like has been good to be like, okay, I'll try to avoid like bigger events or like things I have to be on work wise during this time.
Totally. Totally. And I think even that knowledge, even if you don't end up maybe living in a world where like you have more control over work schedules and what life looks like maybe you still got to take the kids to school and that can't change. But having that knowledge and having that understanding, you can stop like beating yourself up about it and feel like a normal human again and just be like, it's fine. This is just like a normal part where my body is doing something different. So my energies are required differently. And that can feel so good.
No, total. It feels like so or if and I say it like I do it all the time. Sometimes I literally forget and then I'm like, "Fuck, why did I do this to myself? I knew it was coming." Like but you guys talk in the book about like cycle tracking apps because that's a huge thing right now.
Yeah.
And how and that's how I have often tracked my
Mhm.
cycle, but after reading the book and seeing like your data is being collected and you're never quite sure what's happening, like what do you think of the apps compared to just tracking on your
Yeah.
own?
I mean, it's complicated. There's kind of 3 points to it that I feel conflicted on which one feels the most important. It changes from moment to moment. I mean, the data thing is real. It's the
Yeah.
world we live in. I think people are used to just saying yes to that long scrolling contract on an app without, knowing what it's about. But there's a common misunderstanding that because we're disclosing health information, that people think that these health apps have the same health privacy protections that you have legally with the doctor or with your healthcare providers. And that's just not true. People might be familiar with that clause of HIPAA and those
Mhm.
protections that we legally have in the US. That does not apply to these menstrual apps. And so we do have records of people subpoenaing menstrual app data and using it against them in a court of law. Like these things are happening. And in many, many states, especially in the United States, that is not safe information for anybody else
Yeah.
to have. So that one is big. But I will say there's a piece of it that today at least feels bigger for me, which is kind of that idea of, I feel like just being in the world right now, we're so disengaged from being in our bodies.
Mhm.
We're looking outside of ourselves for information that already exists. Like we're able to have it, we're able to be the expert in how our body feels. And there's kind of this comfort that we're drawn to, Dr. Google, if I'm going to Google the answer for this thing. And there's something about using the app in that daily function. And I get it. I'm like, I have
Mhm.
apps on my phone. I've got a phone next to me right now. I'm a human in the world as well. They are very convenient. But
Right.
there's something about when you are exploring what it's like to be in your body, how to make yourself feel better, and you're going to your phone and you're looking at this app and you're looking at this graph and you're looking at this algorithm and you're waiting for it to predict and tell you something
Yeah.
that it's like pulling all the information of like that app is the expert of you that's just like upsetting to me. Like when did we forget to feel and know what it feels like to be in your body? And that, I mean, I think that goes into my third point, which is the part that people really don't know is that the apps are inaccurate. So when it comes to those predictive algorithms of predicting phases like ovulation, the research is showing that the efficacy of that prediction is about 20%, which is
Whoa.
insanely inaccurate. And people are planning their lives around that stuff. They're trying to get pregnant, or they're trying not to, or they're like planning their work schedules and their meetings, all
Their wedding during ovulation.
exactly. Exactly. And it's just not accurate. And that, like, as a midwife, I can't tell you how many appointments I've had for preconception visits and fertility visits with families where they're like, no, no, let me get my phone. I've been tracking for years. And I know that we've been trying and we've been timing it appropriately for this many years, and we're still not pregnant. And I don't understand why. And it takes honestly usually less than like 3 minutes to look at that information and see when someone has been given false information through an app. And
Wow.
it's not that they weren't doing the right things, they were just not following the right advice. And those apps were telling them to try on a time when they were not fertile at all. And that's just like crushing for people because that's time you can't get back.
Yeah, so what's the solution? Like, how are we trying to track then?
I think the idea is just like letting people know it's actually not that complicated. Like you actually don't need an algorithm for it. You don't need this fancy computer for it. I think there is sometimes an overwhelm of like, oh my God, I'm not going to get it right. There's no way I could
Mm.
understand this. I've heard something about a thermometer and I need to do this thing with cervical fluid and that feels way too complicated. But when you really break it down, it's so basic and it's so easy and it takes like seconds to do and can become ingrained in such a way that it's more of a like thing that you like don't even realize you're doing it. You're paying attention to those body fluids, you're paying attention to those sensations, you're paying attention to all of these different factors throughout your cycle where you're like, oh, I totally know that I just ended my fertile window and I'm headed into
Mhm.
this next phase. So I know exactly how to prep and set up for myself. And I don't need my phone to tell me that because I can feel how it is to be in my body. And I can have confidence that I understand what those hormones are saying.
Yeah, total and I something I love that you all do to get yourself, like, back in the body and because again, that's so important and something we, like, so much forget is it feels like in therapy when you have the list of all the different emotions you can have and you keep, like, getting more and more specific, like,
Mhm.
you guys, I feel like, are good at, like, okay, starting like, you give examples of cues you can be feeling in the body, and you start broad, and then you get more specific, and I think that's so cool because sometimes I
Yes.
forget I can experience these emotions or these feelings until I see it written in front of me.
Yes, it's so helpful. I mean, on it, like the most common thing people want to track if they're trying to figure out a diagnosis or something is pain. Like pain is something people are like, I can identify that. I know where that is. But I got to tell you, as a provider, like we can get to that diagnosis a lot faster if we start to use more specifics than this generalized term of pain. And you can really start to identify by like stabbing, radiating. It comes and goes. It's chronic. It's there all the time. It feels like hot. It feels cold. Like there's so much more specificity that can just get you where you're going so much faster. And that's true with everything. Like we don't have to rely on these generalized averages of all human experiences. You can get specific with yourself because you know yourself better than anybody.
Yes, I love your mention of the pain gap because I've never heard it. Like, I know the pleasure gap, that's
Yeah.
my deal. I want everyone to orgasm, but I'd never seen the pain gap described so well. And so speak on that and how that went into you guys just, writing your book.
I mean, I think there's so much behind it. There's like systemic issues where generally people who menstruate, if they go to a provider and discuss having pain, it's most often dismissed or misdiagnosed or told that it's psychosomatic, that it's
Mhm.
all in their head. That's just statistically a reality that we live in. That if you're a menstruating body, like your pain is dismissed in a really different way. And then the other piece of it is we've oversimplified how we talk about pain. So just saying it's present or it's not is like not very useful. That like I don't know if you've seen that like thing at the hospital with the 1 to 10 scale and there's like a little emoji face that like changes a
Yeah.
little bit and it gets to a grimace. It's like we can do better, guys. It's 2025. We can describe that sensation. So that whole pain scale 1 to 10 thing is just it's an oversimplification and it just really needs to be much more involved with that. But I think some of the systemic issues are that, we're like not even taught about menstruating bodies in a real way. Medical research isn't even happening on menstruating bodies. Most of it's on male bodies because there's a different set of more stable hormones. And if and when they're doing like cellular level studies, it's typically on male cells. So we don't even have research about how things affect or feel in menstruating bodies, which means that research is the basis of how our healthcare providers are trained and what they're learning. So even if you have the best provider in the world, like the basis and foundation of their training is missing all of this information
Mhm.
to allow them to actually accept and understand what that pain sensation might be like in your body and figure out how to support it and treat it.
Yeah, and I love in the book that you guys break down so many different like painful things we can run into like endometriosis or
Mhm.
like cystic what's the bladder one oh I forget what
Interstitial cystitis,
yes exactly
the
which I
tongue
didn't even
twister.
interstitial cystitis which I for a long time had like I thought I was having chronic UTIs because I
Mhm.
had never heard of interstitial cystitis and
Mhm.
and it turned out I like was having all the symptoms of UTIs without the UTI because I had ureaplasma in me, but I didn't, which caused like the whatever the cystic bladder, whatever. That's how I'm going to say it because I don't know how to say it properly. But um, and I didn't know how to advocate for myself because I didn't even know what that was. I just kept getting tested for UTIs and they'd be like, "You don't have it," and I'm like, "But something here is wrong." And so I love that you break down all these different
I
things
mean,
you could run into.
yeah, it felt so important to us. We really were just honestly like, how do we get a practical tool in people's hands? Because Laura and I get people in our offices in crisis, like they're already there. They've already like been trying to figure something out. We want people to have this information before crisis. And so having this list of like, whoa, guys, this is super commonly misdiagnosed or
Mhm.
dismissed conditions that you can pretty much read and start to figure out like I think we got to start asking different questions here based on those descriptions there. So it was imperative that we include that list. I know it's a lot of Latin based medical terminology, but if you just comb through it on what's relevant to you, it can save you years towards a diagnosis. I mean, like the endometriosis diagnosis these days, it's like 10-ish years. Mine took 15. That's a lot of my
Wow.
life.
A huge and it's so frustrating that to diagnose it, they have to like, it's such a specific way to diagnose, like, how they have to is it the laparosco is that what it's called? Or what is,
Yeah, the
it
laparoscopic surgery, where
yeah.
it's like an exploratory surgery, and it's really interesting in the medical community these days, and I think it has a lot to do with us calling out, the research gaps and the pain gaps that are happening and how we're doing medical care these days, but realizing some of these diagnostic criteria are based in misogyny. And you can get to a diagnosis by doing comprehensive intake, comprehensive understanding of symptoms and pain, and doing what's called a differential diagnosis, where you're ruling out other conditions. So people are able to get a diagnosis without having an invasive exploratory surgery. It just takes a provider who believes in that system.
Man, it sucks that we have to really fight for ourselves in that way, but I love that you
It
guys are
does.
giving the info to help people do that. And so with you and like endometriosis, how does knowing your cycle help in that?
I mean, it was absolutely life changing for me because I was able to figure out systems that make my pain management much easier. And endometriosis is one of those conditions that doesn't go away. It can get managed and
Mhm.
stabilized, but it never, it's like, it's with you the whole time. So mine changes as I age. It's changed how it presents itself, but I'm able to keep an eye on those things and figure out when I can implement dietary changes or lifestyle changes or pain medication that I take or
Yeah.
all sorts of interventions to really reduce even what my management looks like. Like, there's tons of research on if you're able to front load some of these supportive measures, like start them before the actual symptom or issue has started, but you know it's about to. If you
Mm,
begin that management in advance, you can also often get away with doing less of it. So, like, I've been able to reduce the amount of pain medication that I actually take by preempting it. It's not that my pain or my endometriosis is like suddenly curing itself, but I'm
yeah.
able to manage it better by having that, body signals of, okay, I have this hormonal signal happening in me right now. I know what's going to happen in the next couple days because of that, so I can set up my support today.
That's all. And that has to feel so empowering.
It's so great. I mean, like I said, it was like 15 years towards a
Mhm.
diagnosis. It's talk about repeated dismissal over and over again and disempowered experiences.
Totally.
But it feels great to have that information and know how to advocate for myself. I still have
Mhm.
to navigate, the traditional healthcare system and speak to my providers that are amazing and supporting me through this. But as I'm able to articulate what my body experiences with the menstrual cycle with much more specificity, they're able to offer me such great care that otherwise would be so difficult if I weren't doing this tracking alongside it. So we
Yeah.
we really made that choice in this book to create a tool for people as well of like, okay, what do you do with this information? If you want to share it with somebody, what's the easiest way to do it?
Yeah, and is there like if someone's seeing a doctor who's like dismissive, is there any way to find a like I'm like, is there any system in place to find a doctor who's more understanding? I don't know if something
It's
like that exists. We need like a woman menstruating person like spreadsheet. Like,
Yeah, it is truly complicated, and it is really disheartening and sad to sit here and have to say that of like, hey, our healthcare system's broken. That's the world we live in. So if you want to engage with it, you like gotta like be equipped for it and be ready. You can't be passive in it. That is just the world we live in. But, sometimes it's complicated. If you live in a city where there's not actually many providers to even work with, that's really complicated. More and more, there are, digital access providers, which is really wonderful that we're able to get more expansive with that. But it's often restricted by like health insurance and what kind of coverage we're getting with that. But I do think starting to understand, ways to communicate with your providers if you're feeling like you don't have an opportunity to change a provider can make a difference of still getting the help that you need from people too.
yeah, totally. And finding I think like there are good online communities too that
Mhm.
like are like when I had the ureaplasma and figured out what that was. I usually never recommend Reddit because like hellscape, but like the page for Reddit for ureaplasma is
Yeah,
incredible, and whoever the like top person who set it up is like an
yeah,
amazing genius. It's like 80 pages long, and I was like, oh my
yeah.
god, like shout out to the people who share their experiences.
Yeah. I mean, we're all out here trying to do this together. Like, we're all like
Yeah.
everything's broken and I just need information and nobody told me this. So what am I going to do? And at times, Reddit is amazing. I will agree with you.
Yeah. Most of the times it's scary. Sometimes it's amazing. I think something cool in the book too was like your mention of birth control pills because another thing online right now that we're seeing along with everyone being experts in hormones is like kind of this villainization of the birth
Mhm.
control pill, which to me is really scary during like not having Roe versus Wade. Like I
Yeah.
feel and so I loved that you wrote about the birth control pill in a
Mhm.
non-judgmental way. And two, like how does that affect your cycle? Because I think there's a lot of people still on the birth control pill despite it being villainized, which I think, yes, do what's right for you. I'm on it currently. And
Mhm.
how does that affect your cycle? And why is that still important to track?
Yeah. I mean, each version of a hormonal contraceptive is a little different. So they all could be doing different things, but you are simply adding hormones into your system. And those hormones are going to, in turn, do the same job as the hormones in your body. And they're going to communicate how your body should function and what should work. So learning to understand how they're communicating is still really helpful. So even if your periods look different, like maybe you're on seasonique and you have a bleeding phase every 3 months, you can still be doing tracking and starting to understand like when are those shifts happening, what's it feeling like, and
Mhm.
understand like is this birth control working for me, is it actually like doing the thing I want it to do, does it feel okay in my body, because there's a lot out there and you can dabble, and most of them you're not supposed to be on for 15 or 20 years straight, but people kind of forget that. And it's nice to know that you can be kind of seeing like, is this working for my body still? I don't,
Mhm.
usually they like at 5 years, maybe it's time to switch things up and do another one. And birth control can be life saving, even if you don't, maybe you're not using it for contraceptive, but pain conditions like endometriosis, it can be
Right.
absolutely life saving for some people. Things like PMDD, it can be huge to get that stabilization on board for people too.
Yeah, 100%. And even with me being on birth control, I still feel like I was saying earlier, get this certain symptoms around certain times where like post period, I have to take magnesium or else I have like giant headaches, which I've
Mhm.
learned.
Yeah, exactly. And figuring out what that response is for your body based on what
Mhm.
that hormonal contraceptive is everything. So I do recommend that people track when they're on hormonal contraceptive too.
Yeah, I love that you guys like touched on that and I think that's so important. And I just think in general like I love that you guys are putting this out in the world when we do have a lot of armchair experts like and I've seen, one, you want people to be speaking on the matter on the internet who are educated in it, which we don't always have, but I've seen I'm still on Twitter, unfortunately. Like my brain's broken. I have to be on there because of Love Island and everything. Like I just like it's my place for updates. And I've occasionally seen people on Twitter talking about hormones. I mean, the internet's not a very nuanced place, so they didn't say it like this
Right.
exactly, but how talking about hormones can be almost like a double-edged sword because we don't they were saying we don't wanna, like, for me saying ovulation, you're feral, they don't want us to seem like, "Oh, women, they're, like, run by their hormones," like,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. So what do you think when people start turning the rhetoric to, like, we don't want to be, I guess, so
Yeah.
in tune to our hormones almost?
I mean, like, we just like so have to switch up the conversation here. I mean, like, when did it become the like to have like a flatlined baseline personality is like that's the good one we're after. Like what happened to like nuance and having like superpowers at certain phases that like you're like on fire for this for cognition, you're on fire for this for movement. Like
Yeah,
would you rather just be like mediocre forever or I don't know, there's a little bit of it
totally.
that like why is that basic concept the thing that we're all after is this like lack of any nuance. And that's I think where the like algorithm frustration happens where it's like listen,
Mhm.
we are so individual, like that is the thing that makes this human
Yeah.
experience so cool, and why we can have such amazing innovation and connection around the world is because of the nuance. So let's stop trying to get rid of it.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think, like, I almost feel like the argument I'm not gonna try to, because I don't agree with them, to be clear, and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna try to, like, figure out the argument they're like, I can't put myself in their head, but I almost feel like the argument they're making sometimes is like, "Oh, if we're acting like PMS, like we're a
Mhm.
monster or whatever, like, who
Mhm.
can't control their feelings, then, like, why would they want people wanna put us in the workplace?" Whereas I feel like for myself, like, I'm so good in the workplace because I'm in tune with my body, and, like, I know during this time of the month, like you said, I'm, like, gonna be on fire, and, like, let me
Yeah.
get my stuff done then, and then maybe do more, like, administrative stuff during
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
my PMS phase or whatever.
Yeah, I think that everything else in the world comes with this nuance and changes to the world around you, like what is happening in one moment versus the other. You need to have that flexibility and be able to respond to it, and that's the like superpower. That's the thing that we're missing out when we're just trying to flatline. It does get so complicated when we're talking about the politics of some of the like feminist movements where birth control became this entire liberation to like bring people out of a family building, you know, like the only option of life was that you have kids. Um, and it was all those things. The problem, I think, is a little bit more systemic than that, where we start to realize when we turn that into politics and when we turn that into conversations that are run by health companies instead of human beings and people, we lose the nuance again. We start to say that it's just super polarized. It's one or the other, and like birth control is just like healthcare and contraceptive. It's actually not that big of a deal. It doesn't need to be thrown into these camps. You can still have all the feelings around it, and it's fine.
Right, 100%. Yeah, it is crazy. Why doesn't men's health get politicized? I'm like, what?
Great question.
Like, aren't they on a hormonal cycle too? Like,
Yeah.
don't they have something happening to their body throughout the day that could affect, why aren't we talking about?
Well, they are getting quite a great deal of research on their penile erectile dysfunction. So,
Right.
they're putting
They
their
might be
money where they want
A-okay.
it. Yeah.
Did you see that study? I just saw it on the internet, so I don't know if it was true. I didn't fact check it. But how the endometriosis study where the money went to like studying how pretty people are with endometriosis.
No.
Like people were like, we finally got money for endometriosis, and then like the researchers studied like and found out that people with endometriosis were more pretty. I don't know if that
Oh my
actually
god.
happened, but I
Oh
was
my
like, if it
god.
did, that's crazy.
I mean, all of this is so complicated on like who is running the research and decides who gets to do what research. And it's like, even
Yeah.
if we get a grant to do research on menstruating bodies, like who's the one making decisions about it? It's
And
gonna,
what are they trying to get to the bottom
yeah.
of? Apparently attractiveness.
Yeah. And that's where it's like, hey, okay, I feel like today we deserve better. Like we've been, I don't know, like all of the products that have existed for people around menstrual cycling tracking have been like covered in flowers and like talking about fertility and having babies, and it's just like so gooey, and we deserve so much better than that. And we're in a point in the world where like we got to do this on our own because it's going to take a while for research to catch up. It's going to take a while for that to get systemically into our healthcare systems, but we can set up systems ourselves that work for us and feel good and are like gorgeous, and I'm like proud to
Yeah.
walk around with something and not like embarrassed because it's this like flowery little baby bomb of fertility tracking when I'm just like trying to figure out how to take care of myself.
100%. And so what like advice would you have for someone who wants to like start to get into everything? Um, where do they start?
Yeah, I think there's some really basics that can be really grounding for starting tracking, and starting small is really helpful. So, when we wrote the book, we really felt it was important to include two primary biomarkers because they really give you more of the grounding of what kind of the big players of hormones are doing and how they show up in your individual body. So, learning how to do things like taking your temperature once a day, which is not complicated, it is just that, taking your temperature once a day. And then paying attention to body fluids more than just that bleeding phase. Like if you start to have experiences that feel more dry or lotiony or like clear and slippery, like that gorgeous cervical fluid. Those are the things that are going to tell you exactly what's happening with your hormones at different phases. And then, whatever it is that you are trying to explore or navigate, if it's an issue or you're just kind of curious on how these hormones present in
Mhm.
your body, just tracking a few items, I think, is so helpful. It's really easy for people to identify the pain points and say, like, oh, I hate this. I hate like that my boobs hurt, or I hate that I have constipation, or I hate that I have period cramps. Those are the things I want to track. And that's fine. Do those things. But often what we're forgetting to track are the things that feel good. Like, where is the pleasure? Where is the comfort? How do these hormones show up in your body that feel okay, even neutral? Like, maybe it's not even great, but maybe you have days that feel neutral. Those are often the
Mhm.
pieces of understanding what's happening hormonally that really anchor you into figuring out what's going on, because you're able to actually like triangulate that data and see how these hormones show up in such a different way. And we know when you start to have mindful practices, like just simply looking for 2 seconds a day, like, did I experience any kind of pleasure or specific type of comfort in my body, you start to create space for it if it didn't exist before. Like, that is a
Cool.
fact, that is a thing that happens. And that is imperative, especially when we're talking about people who are dealing with chronic illness or chronic pain, and the capacity to be nuanced and still have experiences of comfort and still have pleasure, to integrate those things in. So, my biggest advice in beginning a tracking journey is don't get lost in the weeds of turning yourself into a science project and having a spreadsheet with like 72 categories of horrible things, because you're just going to feel horrible. And it
Yeah.
becomes really like, I don't know, it gets neurotic really quick, where it feels like you have to have this perfection with it and you have to do it and you just get lost in the weeds and there's no pattern to break down. But starting with what's most important, I think, can really get you where you're going, and you can mix it up as you go.
I think that's really great. And yeah, I think you all share such good info, and I'm so thankful for it. And I'm thinking now, just like even another reason to do this is like when I was not on birth control and was having such pain, um, I would go to the doctor, but it would always be, like, after the pain happens, so when I was in,
Mhm.
like, a good positive place, and they'd be like, What's wrong?" And I'd be like, "Nothing." Like, it's almost
Totally.
like a f my brain just forgot it, and then, like, 2 weeks later, it's like, "Oh, no, it's back."
Yep.
Just and so I think just having something you can refer back to in no matter the scenario, whether you're
Yeah.
wanting to go to the doctor, or yeah, like, just for all the reasons we've talked about, for
Yeah.
pain, for what you're gonna be like mentally, what your body's gonna be like, is such like we didn't even talk about like body physical changes and how
Mhm.
like I'll cry to my husband once a month and be like, my body's so ugly. And then like clockwork, I get my period, and it's like, oh, like it would just be nice to have this to refer back to.
Yeah, it's so real. I mean, and being able to understand, like, are those physical, real, tangible changes in my body? Like, is my waistline changing? Am I experiencing significant bloating? Am I like retaining water? Is that real? Or is it those like serotonins and dopamines that change every cycle? Is that the thing that's giving me this like dysmorphic episode where I like do not feel like I'm in my body? I don't even recognize it, but it's actually not changed at all. Just how I feel has. That's really powerful to know which one is happening.
Totally. It's so funny how I will literally like cry and be like, I'm the ugliest girl alive. And then the day I get my period, I'm like, I'm stunning. Like, it's like, wait, what was I thinking? And
Yeah,
it just
and you get
continues
to
to happen.
remind yourself that now, you know?
Yeah.
I'm
Like,
stunning.
I'm tomorrow, Abby, you're gonna feel
Mhm,
stunning. Like, just
mhm,
get through today.
mhm.
Are there any lasting advice before we move on to send it to the sewers that you want the feral friends to walk away with?
I would just say don't be afraid of tracking if you've been hesitant or curious around it. You do not have to become like a little spreadsheet gremlin. You do not have to set aside 3 hours of your day to do this process. It is a simple, mindful, and like, dare I say, pleasurable experience, and you can make it that way.
Yes, and you guys talk about how it affects pleasure too. That's a whole nother element of the book. There's so much good info in here. I really hope listeners you check it out because it like it's just gonna help you feel empowered. It feels good to know what's actually happening in your body, which is great. So getting into Send It to the Sewers. This is the
Yes,
segment of the episode where we rant about something that's been on our mind this week. Would you like me to go first or would you like to go first?
you can go first.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid to offend first. Do you have a dog?
I do, but you can vent.
Okay. Well, I'm sending to the sewers breeders of designer dog breeds.
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm like, I don't want to offend in case you have one. But I just see these like especially like I don't know if it's French bulldogs or something at the
Mhm.
dog park with their giant balls and like I'll be like that usually dogs are meant to be like spayed or neutered if they're at the dog park and I'll be like that's strange and then I'll be like oh like you know where's your you struck up conversation and usually it's revealed during this conversation this person is breeding their dog and I
Mhm.
am just like one, there's so many dogs in shelters like that need homes that are so my dog is right next to me right now. He's so lovely. He's a little mutt. He's from shelters. Two, some of these designer breeds should not be alive. Like I am watching these like dogs that cannot breathe like walk around. And I'm like, and we're making more of them and they're getting more inbred and like less likely to breathe. I'm like, oh, they have so many issues. One, if you want a designer breed, you can definitely find it at the vet because they have so many like skin issues, whatever, that people end up usually give like a lot of people give them
Yeah,
up. So or not at the vet, at the shelter, you can find
yeah.
them, I feel. You don't have to like get a $3,000 one. But two, I'm just like, maybe it's time evolution takes its course and these dogs, like we stop breeding them and just, let them slowly turn into mutts because it's too much.
I love it. I have a mutt who looks like Fozzie the Bear at home, and people like want him to be fancy so much.
Mhm.
Like every time we take him for a walk, they're like, "What is he? Irish Wolfhound? Is he a Doodle? Oh no, he's this. He's a Spinoni. He's a this. He's the Vizsla." And all we're just like, all we know is that he's primarily dog. I don't know. And it's like almost feels offensive when they're like, what is this fancy breed? And we're like, it's $60 from the Humane Society. And we
Right.
love it.
And he's a little bit of everything. Like,
He's perfect.
he's perfect. That's yes, I love the mutts or like even the purebreds,
Yeah.
but at a shelter. Like,
Yeah.
it's just man, it's just seeing these dogs, like, especially when it's hot in LA and they can't breathe, and I'm like, these dogs don't want to be here.
Yeah. Woof.
It's rough. What are you sending to the sewers?
Okay. This was really hard for me to decide, but I am sending ovulation predicting algorithms to the sewers because they are
Great.
never right. Ovulation is dependent on the world you live in, what your job looks like, what your sleep looks like, and your algorithm is never going to take into account the like fight you had with your sister on the phone that day. It's never going to be able to get that fine tuned. So, see you later, predictive ovulation algorithms.
I love that. My like humble brag has always been I got married when I was ovulating, so I was at my hottest, but I was using the app, so who even knows?
That's
It was like
great.
you were full luteal this day. Like, who knows? Oh,
That's great.
yeah. But
That's
no, I
really
think
great.
that's great. And I'm just so excited. I'm so thankful that you guys have created the cycle book and so just excited for people to check it out. And yeah, it was I love learn like it made me feel good to read. Like I felt like in that moment as I'm reading, like this is good that I know this stuff.
I
Like this
love
is
that.
awesome.
I love that.
Where can my fail friends and listeners find you, find Laura, find the book?
You can find us at thecyclebook.com. You can find information about getting the book through all major retailers and online, all the things, and information about Laura and mine's respective private practices as well. And we're also on social media at The Cycle Book. Hang out with us there, all the places.
Yay! Okay, feral friends, everyone, check out Morgan, check out the Cycle Book. And Morgan, thank you so much for being here. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for
Bye.
having me.